So this is the second sample from my new book. The new book is called Mortality and the Human Imagination, and I have taken 3 representative samples, put the text up on the webpage, and then have these read-along, speak-along bits. So you can listen, or you can read, or you can listen and read. You could read, then listen. You could listen, then read. Whatever combination of input you have chosen, I thank you for taking the time. I'm quite happy with how the book turned out, although, of course, now that it is in publication, I see all of the flaws and errors, but hopefully you will find those charming and endearing, and you will let me know, and then I will write another book where I correct or elaborate on the things that were wrong or unclear in this first book of essays. So the book is available on Amazon. You can go to Amazon and search directly for the title and my name, Andrew Kaiser, or you can go to zenglop.net/publications, and on that page you'll find all of the samples. There are 3 of them, and a link through to Amazon, should that be something that you choose to do. So I hope you enjoy this. The section is called Razor's Edge. It's writing about writing and the process of writing and what it's like to look at a blank page and all of the associated ideas that come along with that. So I hope you enjoy it. Again, thank you for listening. Here you go. Everything hangs in the balance. It is a razor edge from the moment the day starts. W.H. Auden wrote a poem of the North. In that poem, a traveler describes the place rejecting all hope, distant from cities and physicians. And the traveler hopes, "Let me be far from any physician, and the ports have names for the sea, the cities, the corroding, the sorrow, and north means to all, reject." The story I heard is that Auden intended the line to read that poets have names for the sea, but that a typographical error introduced the new word in the second line, ports, which he preferred even if the sense isn't so clear. I do the same thing. A word sounds right, and so the sentence shapes the way it will, even though the dictionary would rebel. Even in my orchestral writing, though, I think it is important for a composer to hone the craft of catching mistakes. I once wrote a piece for orchestra. It was a ballet celebrating the 50th anniversary of Yuri Gagarin's spaceflight. I had mislabeled a part in the score marimba. I don't remember if I at one point thought there should be a marimba, and then changed my mind, forgetting to delete the line, or if I had used a template available in the score creation software and neglected the necessary cut and paste cleanup. However, it happened the score I sent over asked for a marimba. The orchestra hauled, uncomplaining, a marimba from Prague to Paris for the one movement out of 9, where I had asked for 2 chords to be struck, once and hard a few times only. The player misread my score, which wasn't a surprise, since the part shouldn't have existed at all. Instead of a hard, dry strike, he played a lovely tremolo, which sounded so good I asked him to repeat it in several other movements exactly as he had played. It is good to keep a dream journal. The dreams like to know that I am listening. They like to know it is worth keeping up the effort. I have no intent or expectation that a dream can be interpreted, with signs and signals assigned significantly as such. I would not suggest saving off a written record of each night's dreams for follow-up discussion, not for interpretation, and never, it seems, with insight or inspiration. Keeping track of dreams is good practice for listening, so that when I step out, trembling, into the imagination, held together by nothing but a blank piece of paper, then I have some wits about me when it comes to listening, recording, remembering, and reconfiguring the unbearable insights. Recognizing elements of a dream is like clinging onto a cliff face, my body contorted so that a foot rests on a narrow ledge, the other leg presses in against the rock, while each hand extends at all angles so that my profile is like a warped hieroglyphic. I look like the image Duchamp captured in his Bride Descending, that big fractured piece of glass. The craft of the artist, the skill of the shaman, the ecstasy of the visionary is to wander into these states, eyes open, climbing the cliff, and come back with something that can be written. Terence McKenna said that you go out into the psychedelic imagination like a person in a boat on the ocean looking for a big fish. The ocean is deep, the waves are long and ancient from halfway across the planet, and the sky is a dark continuation of the edges. The boat is small and sturdy. You want a fish that is just the right size. You don't want Leviathan to run into your net, drag your boat out to sea, then plunge down to the abyss, where strange creatures live with insufferable presses and pressures without light or oxygen. Other fish are too small. In his recorded rap, McKenna points out that your little finger fits perfectly in your nostril. True, no doubt, and many of those frenetic images will fill your net and make it feel heavy and permanent. But there is no sustenance for the poetic fury that drove you onto the waves. No, you're looking for an idea of sufficient weight that it is worth the struggle to land and can be shared with the folk back home. Therefore, it's important to listen, and listen in particular to the glitches, the bits beneath the mind. I had 3 dreams over the course of a month where I had a conversation with Charles Ives. In one dream, we walked down a country lane. I was an observer. I could see the two of us from a vantage point about 50 feet behind, and at one point he put his left hand on my right shoulder to emphasize some point. A second dream, we were sat down next to each other at the piano. The third dream, I didn't write down and don't remember. The conversations were affectionate, and he is familiar with my work. In the dreams, my work is far more complete than it is here, than it is now. My handwritten scores are set against the piano in a disordered pile of scratchy notes and drafts. That, at least, is familiar. I am much younger in the dreams than I am now. In the dreams, I am always on his left, which means my right ear is facing him. I am deaf in my right ear, and I'm always aware of the choreography required to make sure I'm pointing the good listening side to whoever is talking. Why does he sit on my broken side? When I think about those dreams, I know that Ives is not a construct of my self-history, not a combination of bits of things I remember or desire. He is something external, something separate that I'm having an honest interaction with. The line had stretched a bit between what is imagined and what is real, what is comfortably in myself and what is externally necessary. It's interesting that each dream is recalled from the third person, right? That I am behind and observing the interactions. The dreams stopped after that short and deliberate spurt, I guess because I didn't start writing even when this precious package dropped so clearly in my lap. I wasn't taking it seriously, or I was too afraid to start. Why would Ives keep showing up if I'm not going to do the decent thing and at least start applying some discipline to my writing? I can't blame him. When I first encountered Terence McKenna, it was on a short recording sampled by a band from Aberdeen called The Shaman, and mixed into a rave track called Re-Evolution. The sampled McKenna describes an object, glittering in hyperspace, illuminating this mystic and that visionary. He says, history is the shockwave of the eschaton. The eschaton is the last moment of time, whatever that means in a universe that considers itself to be infinite. The eschaton is an event that is so unique and compelling that the structure of time ripples. The structure of time, the material of time itself, doesn't maintain a requirement for linear chronology. Linear chronology is an attribute of our movement through time, like our tendency to float in water or fall through air. These shockwaves, the shockwaves of the eschaton, travel back from the end of time and cause ecstatic visionary experience. When Messiaen wrote a quartet called For the End of Time, he was describing eddies in the tides of time, the warp and woof, the warp and woof, the weft. The end of time is not the destruction of all things, the separation of change from perception. So, over time and repeated listenings to McKenna and to Messiaen, to Mahler and to Monteverdi, I formed a really concrete image of the eschaton, like what McKenna says is glittering in hyperspace. I started to use the word Zenglop to describe this object, or at least to formulate the material that shot out into the mind. Glop is this oozy sort of substance that fills in a gap between different imaginal objects. Zenglop. It's a word that has become my moniker for electronic music, and a phrase I use often when I need to lump different metaphysics into a single pile. McKenna gave talks, inspired raps really, in a workshop and teaching sessions over a dozen years in the early 1990s until he died of a brain tumor in 2000. Tape cassette recordings of these talks have been distributed independently, categorized and labeled in whatever personal hagiography was favored by the original owner. Each session contains so many different ideas woven together by McKenna's voice that the same material could easily be distributed under different names in different combinations. The rap evolved. General advice on dose and settings became specifics about the psychedelic landscape, leading to the perfectly sized idea of the time wave. Throughout my notebooks, I have quotes from Terence McKenna that I am entirely unable to correctly attribute. One of these is a reference to Jung. My sloppy scraps of notes referring to Terence McKenna quoting Jung. Quote, precisely because the psyche and the physical are mutually dependent, it has often been conjectured that they may be identical somewhere beyond our present experience. Unquote. Isn't that an extraordinary thing for Jung to have written? The imagination is a place, but more than that, it's a third place that can be shared. Can we wander in together to the same shared location of the mind? What does that place feel like? If it is a concretization of the mind, do we walk there together, like a fairy castle? Or do we close our eyes and see the same unfolding dream? The task is to hone a craft in such a medium that this mutual dependency between the imagination and the physical can be experienced, retold, and recapitulated. I use a room on the third floor as a studio. Sometimes I write music, although I prefer to play at the grand piano we have downstairs rather than on the upright up there. Sometimes I write essays, although lately my most successful work has been on a train ride between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. One corner of the room is separated with a couple of bookshelves where I have a cushion and a small altar for my meditation. Notebooks from over the years are flat on a shelf. stacked against the wall or left leaning on the floor against the piano pedals, just as Charles Ives saw in my dream. I need to con myself into writing. My first trick is to find some older page that already has writing on it and say that I'm editing or expanding on that idea. My notebooks are filled with what I consider ideas for future work. The notes I take in the middle of the night to recall a dream are better written than most of these and are also better organized. One night always proceeds from the previous, after all. My writing notes, however, are mostly taken after a few drinks. Bourbon on the rocks, about a third way done the first, when every idea suddenly becomes lucid, fluid, and golden. By the bottom of the second, my position has become precarious, my authorial integrity suspect. But it's a trade-off I make so as to never have to look at a blank page clear-headed and indefatigable. I once figured that each glass is about 6 ounces of liquor in what I think is called a double old-fashioned tumbler that I've stacked with ice and filled to the brim with wild turkey. I like to ice down my bourbon, and I enjoy tasting the heat of the Wild Turkey 101 as it modulates over time while the ice melts. Sometimes, before I pour the bourbon into my double old-fashioned tumbler, I will stuff some frozen blueberries onto the top of the ice. I call this drink the Blue Buford. Buford was my dog. A fine old beagle boy was Buford. Toward the end of one notebook, I copied from Robert Frost that the, quote, meaning of poetry is the risking of spirit in substantiation. End of quote. I think every writer who drinks is trying to pull a fast one over on the muse. And when I say every writer, I mean this writer. Sleight of hand and misdirection. It is unbearable to face directly the risk inherent in the start of each day, the opening of each blank piece of paper. One stumble from the razor's edge, and the edifice comes down.